Hey guys, welcome to the channel. In this episode, I'm going to be walking you through my wireless charging and wireless CarPlay setup in my 718 Cayman. This should work in, say, the 991 and the 981s, and you can take with it whatever you want and take it to other Porsches probably. But this is what I did to meet my high expectations. And I had some important requirements. You see, I don't like stuff in the cockpit generally. I like to enjoy the Porsche design as it is. So I need something stealthy, inconspicuous, something that works and doesn't take up too much space. I want to be able to just get in the car, throw my phone in the center console and start up the car and have Apple CarPlay start up automatically, wirelessly. And when I'm done, just be able to grab my phone and crawl out of my carbon bucket seats. So how do I make all that come together? Well, it took a little bit of work. And if you're not interested in going through all the work that I've got here, I'm going to be sharing with you some ideas on how you can simplify it to go to the depth that you want to. So stick around and I'll explain everything. I think we've come to really like our wireless charging on our phones these days, and when you're in a slightly older technology car like the 718 here, there is no wireless charging in it. So what can you do to enjoy that? Because honestly, getting in and plugging in your phone, I'm not a big fan, and I don't like things up around. Although I did do a video on the Anima Motorsports phone mount. That thing is really cool if you gotta have your phone out. But what if you could have your phone put away? So the downside, of course, to wireless charging is that if you like to use CarPlay or Android Auto, you got to be plugged in. So you got to solve that solution, and that is with wireless CarPlay. And you probably know there's all these wireless CarPlay dongles out there, but you can't just use any. There are some that are more inconspicuous that really work without using up space and aren't noticeable. And I'm going to share that with you. So let's start with that. First of all, if you're going to use a wireless CarPlay dongle, you have to have wired CarPlay in the beginning. Everyone always asks me that, oh, does this add CarPlay? No, it does not. I've done a lot of reviews on CarPlay dongles. Some of them have extra cool functionality. I'll put a whole playlist down in the description if you want to learn about them. In the past, they were sort of inconsistent, but now they're pretty consistent, and the ones I've tested in the car all seem to work in my Porsche. You do have to have CarPlay. So if you have a 981 or a 991, there are aftermarket solutions. A lot of those also include a wireless setup. And if you have PCM 4.0, like I have in my 2021 GT4, you can do a little bit of a hack. It involves basically downloading some files to an SD card, throwing it in there, and letting it load up. And you can basically turn on some functions that you may not have got from the factory, like navigation, the Wi-Fi hotspot here in the car, track precision app, Android Auto, which wasn't even an option when I spec'd this car. I didn't have any of that stuff except for the CarPlay. I did spec that, but navigation and stuff wasn't in here. I did the hack, and I've been running it like that for years, and it's awesome. So this video is not about that. If you want to learn more, you're going to have to do research. Check the links down in the description for the forum posts about that stuff. I highly recommend it. So once you have CarPlay, we got to go wireless. There are wireless dongles out there that essentially plug into the USB port that you would normally plug in for CarPlay, and they have a Bluetooth and Wi-Fi signal to your phone, and they can show CarPlay right on the screen. It works like normal. It just takes a few seconds to boot up, like 20 seconds generally. But you don't want this thing taking up space in your center console. I don't want to see it. And so there are some in the right shape and size that work. So the one I'm using is this one. It's called Copilot. This company sent me a couple of these to review years ago, and I'm still using them. They work great. But you'll find that a lot of the CarPlay dongles are made by different people, but they all look the same, or the software's the same. I'm sure there's a reason for that. So you can get the exact same form factor, shape, size, operation from CarlinKIT. And that's on Amazon, which is nice because it's got the returnability of Amazon products. But I noticed they have some new models that are a different shape and size. So it's really important that you measure this area here, because this is where you want to put it. This keeps it out of the console. You don't see it, your passengers don't see it, and it fits right there. But it's not just the size of the unit itself, it's also the cable. This cable is about 8 inches tip to tip, about 6 inches of actual cable there, minus the connectors. And that is just right. So I can actually open the armrest almost completely without it getting hung up and pulling on the cable. And I don't have excess cable lying around in here or getting caught when I close this. That's all really important. Again, I have high standards here. But there are new CarPlay dongles out there that look like little thumb drives, and those wouldn't take up much space. They look pretty cool, but I haven't tried any yet. So if you have a CarPlay option that's inconspicuous like this, let us know. Share with us in the comments what you've used and what you like. All right. So now we've solved the wireless CarPlay issue. We gotta now think about charging, because when you're using CarPlay and maps and stuff, you are using some serious batteries. So you want your phone plugged in, especially for longer trips, but not plugged in. You want it wireless charging. And that's what I did here. So I wanted something, again, inconspicuous. And originally I intended to have a charging pad under the rubber mat here, but the rubber mat is a little too thick and you can't charge that way. It would be really cool if you could just carve out, everything but 0.5 millimeter of the mat, but that's gonna be tough. So I decided to cut a hole. As simple as that, folks. It's a very tough rubber though, and I found that a razor blade is not easy to work with in this situation. So what did I decide to do? I decided to melt a hole. I basically did a hot cookie cutter thing. Now, I didn't have one of these cool cookie cutters you can get off Amazon. They're metal and you can pick the right size. I ended up just sizing an exhaust clamp and heating it up with a torch and then pressing it in. It wasn't a perfect circle, and so I had to work with it, and it didn't come out as clean as I had hoped. It looked pretty darn rough. So what did I do about that? Well, hey, I've got a 3D printer. 10 minutes, I whipped up a design. 10 minutes later, I had a prototype, and 2 revisions later, I had this beautiful trim piece in here. And this trim piece is gonna cover up my hack job, plus the inner circle is perfect to fit my wireless charger. So I just picked up one of these wireless chargers from Amazon. They're pretty cheap. They're not the actual Apple ones, but I like their size and how thin they are, and they are magnetic. With this thing installed here with my trim piece and the hole in the mat, I ran the cable under the mat. I actually cut a groove in the mat using a hot solder iron to make a little valley for the cord to go in, just to make the mat sit a little better. And then it goes into the holes here in the console. From there, I was able to run the wire along this side of the console. To get better access, you'll want to remove this piece here. I've shown in many other videos. Once that's removed, you have a little more access to tuck the wire as needed and run it all the way down to your footwell plug. At your footwell plug, you'll want to use a USB adapter. Now, those are not all made the same. I like these flush mount ones. They fit really nice, but you got to get the ones that have the wattage. You want something that can do at least 10 to 12 watts for these wireless chargers. That means at least 2.4 amps generally per slot. And you get that, and then you can plug into there. But I didn't do that, folks. That's one of the easy routes I told you about. I ended up hardwiring. Why? Well, first of all, this one has a 3-foot cable. 3 feet is not enough. It's about 6 inches too short. So you're gonna wanna make sure if you get one of these pucks for magnetic charging that you get one with at least 4 feet of cable to do that option. So instead, I went back and I did what I originally planned to do, which was hardwire it. Once you have this trim panel off, it's pretty easy to pull out this button panel here, and there's a small connector underneath to get it out of the way. And you look inside, and I have the smoker's package, which means I have a cigarette lighter and power here. And down there in that hole, you'll see a connector to it and some wires. The red wire is the power. What you'll need is one of these 12-volt DC converters to USB. These are super cheap on Amazon as well. They have a USB-A port and essentially get power from however you wire it into your car. So you take the red wire and you need to connect it to the red wire at the cigarette lighter port. If you got a cigarette lighter, that is. This is a very tight space. I could not figure out how to disconnect the connector. And so I decided to do something I don't normally like to do, and some of you are going to complain about, is I used a vampire clip. Vampire clips are cool. They take your wires and they splice them together by simply clamping in, and it sort of bites into the wire that you're trying to draw power from. And it can be destructive. If you screw it up or you do it too many times, you could end up clipping the wire, and you don't want that either. I like these vampire clips. They clip on, and then there's a separate spade connector, and it made it really easy in this situation. I'll have a link to that down below, of course, as well. So I put the spade connector on the USB converter, the red wire, and then I connected it and vampire clipped it into the red wire of the power plug. As for the grounding wire, the black one, well, you just want to ground it to maybe one of these screws down in here. I didn't have an eyelet. That would be the best way to do it. So I just stuck the wire down there and screwed the screw in. It's grounded. It works fine. This whole setup works in here because, there's not water intrusion. It doesn't move around a lot. So I think the vampire clip is acceptable here. But you got that little converter unit. You need to make sure that's out of the way. It's not going to get in the way of the transmission linkage. So you want to use some double-sided 3M tape to mount it to the side and make sure it's low enough so that you can put your button panel back into place. With that, I plugged in my charger into that and tucked the wires away so there are no wires to see in my cockpit anymore. The wireless charger is here. It just looks like it was built in, which is exactly what I like, sort of OEM plus. And of course, if you don't look under the lid, you don't see the wireless charger. It's important to note that running Google Maps, as well as possibly the wireless CarPlay, does require more battery power from your phone. And this hardwired solution, as well as the USB adapters, don't quite have enough juice to add charge to your phone. It only maintains it. A recent 1-hour drive had the percentage of my battery on my iPhone 16 not change up or down at all. If you're looking to gain more charge, you may need to use a larger USB adapter, but I have not tested these, so let us know in the comments if you do. So that is a lot of in-depth stuff, right? So like I said, you don't have to hardwire it. You can run it all the way down to the footwell and do a USB adapter. But what about that trim piece? You're like, I don't have a 3D printer. I don't have the design skills, whatever. I understand. So you may want to think of something else. You know, you can get in touch with me via Instagram or Facebook or my email address right here. Contact me and maybe I can work with you for a fee, of course, for my time and the supplies. And maybe we can put something together for your solution if you really want to do this like I have. But there are other options. For example, you could just have the magnetic charger on the mat. The problem is when you want to pick up your phone out of there, the charger is going to come with it because it's magnetically attached, and then you got to use 2 hands to separate them and then get out of the car, and these seats are hard enough to get out of, right? So you want that charger stuck to the mat. Unfortunately, double-sided 3M tape does not stick to this mat very well. You're probably gonna want to glue it. Either some hot glue, I don't know how well it's going to hold up, or super glue, which will definitely melt the rubber and really get that charger connected to the mat. The mat is $50, so be ready. Make sure you've measured, make sure that you've set it up right so you know that ergonomically and functionality wise it's gonna work before you do any permanent changes. And I think that'll work. But if you want to go even simpler, there are these sort of non-skid charging mats, and you could put one of those in here. They just take up more space, which was one of my requirements. I didn't want to take up more space, and this doesn't take up any extra space. But a charging mat will take up most of this space. The charging mats aren't all made equal either. Make sure that they have the appropriate wattage and make sure that they have a cable length that's appropriate. Also, make sure it fits in that space. Again, this is a better solution for me. I think it just looks sexier. I think if you had 3D printing skills, you could print a whole mounting piece in here where you snap in a magnetic charger and, you know, make your own rubber mat. I don't know. There's all sorts of things you could do, but you know, you just got to decide what you are going to be happy with. And of course, if you just want to go other routes, I've seen a charging unit that goes right here that might get in the way of your shifter if you like to shift. But again, then it's in the cockpit, something I don't like. And you know, the other thing was the Anima Motorsports mount, which I think is the best phone mount to, you know, if you're not going to hide your phone, that is absolutely the best one, because I use this ball mount to mount my Garmin Catalyst at the track, and then it plays double duty with its magnetic mounts and these really cool wheel designs that they did, and then you can have your phone right there. But if you want the wireless charging, I highly recommend the Peak Design wireless charging magnetic mount. Peak Design makes some seriously good stuff. My phone case is Peak Design. I love it. And then of course you're gonna have to run and tuck the wires. I mean, that is your other wireless charging solution, and that's all there is. But if you don't want anything in here, you should go this way because this is super slick, I think. All right, guys, if you appreciated this video and what I've shared with you today, let me know. Hit that like button, consider subscribing, and hit the bell to be notified of future content. And if you come up with some other solutions or ideas, throw them in the comments because people are gonna be reading this and they're gonna be trying to figure out what they wanna do. All right, well, that's it. Stay fast, but stay safe. We'll see you next time.